All right, everyone, welcome to Wellness Wednesday. I'm Phoebe Lapine of Feed Me Phoebe, and today we're going to be talking all about the hidden causes of back pain and how to fix them. So I have Jesse Cannone with me, who's the author of the 7-Day Back Pain Cure. I almost said 7 hour, which would be amazing, but let's not get too ambitious.
Well,
And
sometimes that is the case. It depends on the person, and for some people, it's the 7 month.
yes. I think I'm more in the 7 month camp, but we'll see. So I was telling Jesse off air that the irony of all ironies, because we've had this on the calendar for months now, is that I threw my back out last week. And if you follow me on Instagram, you've seen all of my moaning about that and the pictures from where I was on the floor for 2 hours last week. So I'm thrilled to be doing this talk, and after having read Jesse's book, really excited to share a lot of the easy lifestyle advice that he has with all of you. So first things first, Jesse, you began your career as a personal trainer, I know. So why don't you tell us the rather amusing story of how you fell into back pain and gained love in the process?
Sure. So, as you said, I started out as a personal trainer in my 20s. I think I was like 22, fresh out of the military, and I thought the idea of getting paid to work out sounded great. So I went that route, and what I quickly realized is I was frequently hurt, and I was following the traditional fitness advice in all the magazines, and the internet wasn't nearly what it is today, so it was mostly magazines and books, and what you saw from other people, other trainers in the gyms. And I looked around, and everybody was hurt, including myself, and I was supposed to be this expert, and meanwhile, I could hardly work out because I was having all sorts of problems. So I was diagnosed with scoliosis as a kid, but it never had caused me any problems, so I had forgotten about it.
That was a really interesting thing in your book, because I too was diagnosed with scoliosis as a kid, and it never caused me any problems, but I always kind of think about it in the back of my head.
Yeah, we could talk more about that later, but it's a very common thing. It's a misdiagnosis, and it's extremely common, and it's because they have people who are not trained in true spinal assessment, assessing children's spines in schools all over the world. And so anyway, that never bothered me until I was doing all this bodybuilding and weightlifting, and then I started having back pain, and I thought, oh, maybe it's this scoliosis that I had from childhood. I also was having tendonitis in both arms. I was having really bad knee pain, and the knee pain was the worst. Had met a beautiful young lady, and we started dating, and she loved to run, and so I was like, sure, I'll go running with you, and I would run like a mile, but not 6 or 12 miles at a time like she would do. And within I'd say probably within a month, my knee hurt so bad that I couldn't work out anymore, and it got really bad where I would be in the grocery store, she and I would just all of a sudden it would completely buckle, and I'd collapse onto the floor, lying in the middle of the grocery store on the dirty floor there, like unable to move. And I mean, my knee would get stuck in a 90-degree angle, so it would bend, it would collapse, bend, and be stuck there, and I couldn't straighten it out. And anyway, it was very strange, and of course the doctors couldn't tell me what was going on. Orthopedic surgeons, chiropractors, physical therapists, I did it all. Nobody could fix it, so they recommended surgery. And this is also very common, just like the faulty scoliosis diagnosis. They described my knee as having irregular or abnormal meniscus. So they were basically saying the cartilage in my knee didn't look normal, and therefore, we can go in and we'll clean it up, and then you'll be good as new. Well, thankfully, I was attending a continuing education course on rehabilitation, and on the break, I asked one of the guys who I was really impressed with his presentation. I said, "Hey, I'm having this really, bad problem. Can you tell me what, any insights, any thoughts?" And he said, "Sit down, stand up, sit down, stand up." And I did, and he said, you have a high right hip. And I was like, what are you talking about? What does that mean? And he briefly kind of explained to me how our bodies get pulled out of place. And many people are probably familiar with this in terms of chiropractic care. You know, like the spine gets pulled out of alignment.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the whole body gets pulled out of alignment, not just your spine. Everything from the joints in your fingers and toes to the joints in your head and neck, and any joint in the body can be pulled out of alignment. And what happens is our muscles get out of balance, and they pull us out of alignment. And then every day, that joint and multiple joints throughout our body are forced to function in this out of balance way. And the analogy I like to use is it's like a car that has the steering out of alignment. When the steering's out of alignment, yes, you can still drive it, and yes, it still will function relatively normally. However, eventually, what it's doing is it's wearing down your tires unevenly, and eventually, if you don't pay attention to the tires, you'll have a tire likely blow out. And so that's kind of what happens in our bodies, and that happened to me. But what he shared with me in this like 2-minute interaction was this concept, and I was like, oh wow, this really makes sense. And he showed me like 2 stretches to do. One to relieve the symptom, so stretching the outer hip on the side that was experiencing the pain, and then addressing the cause, or more of the cause, which was stretching a tight inner thigh or groin muscle on the opposite leg. Mm. And so, long story short, 2 days later my pain was gone. 2 weeks later it was like almost completely gone, and I was able to cancel the surgery, which was about a month away, and ever since then I've been helping people relieve pain in many ways, but one way, and the primary way I started, which was that muscle imbalance approach, which I call muscle balance therapy.
So it's so interesting. So how did you develop your system for that, and how do you help people diagnose which muscles are imbalanced on themselves?
Yes, great question. So trial and error, really. I mean, I'd love to say that I took a course and that was it, but really it was experimenting on people, myself and my clients. So after fixing myself, I was like, this is amazing. I've got to help my clients with this, because I have all these clients who I'm constantly having to kind of work their workouts around their problem areas, because they don't, because they're not getting help from their doctors and their therapists and so on. So I started experimenting with my personal training clients and fixing them, and quickly I had a lot of success with it. Mm. I was like, wow, this is great. And so I kind of became known as Mr. Fix-It, in terms of people with injuries. And so it was a combination of experimentation on myself and my clients, lots of study. I'm a researcher by nature. I love to learn. So I attended every course I could. I read every book that was out there on the subject. I took bits and pieces from everybody and kind of combined it all into what I felt was the most effective approach. And it's ever evolving. The approach that I used back then on myself and those, my clients, was very simplistic in comparison to what I teach now. And by simplistic, I don't mean it's complicated now. It's just much more thorough and effective now, because I'm aware of so much more than I was, 10, 15 years ago.
So I know you do talk about in your book how there are usually multiple causes of back pain, not just a trauma, not just one lifestyle thing. What are some of the really simple ones that people often overlook and will, go to great lengths to spend hundreds of dollars on therapies, or even go to the lengths of surgery before doing X?
Right. Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, it's never one thing, and it's very rare. It very rarely is the major cause what you think it is. So, when you throw your back out like you did recently, everybody tends to blame it on the one thing. They're like, oh, for a lot of people, oh, I had a car accident when I was 20, and every couple of years it happens. And obviously trauma is real. So trauma can be a cause, but it is not the most common cause. So the most common causes, and these are not in any specific order, but I'm kind of ranking the highest ones at the top here. The biggest one, and I will put this one at the top, hands down the biggest cause of back pain and other ailments and other conditions is stress. And not just what you hear people talk about stress, like, oh, they're stressed out. By stress, it's kind of stress, negative emotions, negative beliefs, childhood, and pain and trauma, and not physical trauma, but emotional trauma. So our emotions and our how we deal with them, and I would kind of lump stress into that. Really, and actually, the name I give it is really kind of like mind, mind health. How healthy is your mind? And it's really more than your mind. It's more of also your heart. And some people would then kind of take it to a spiritual level even. But if you're kind of really to simplify it, I kind of view us as humans as a triangle, mind, body, and diet. So in the case of the mind, many people, all of us, have emotional, baggage, if you will. Hurts from big ones to small ones that are inside of us that we've not dealt with, and they manifest physically. So to kind of prove my point, if you've ever been to a scary movie, right, and you're watching the movie and the music builds up and the suspense is building, and and then all of a sudden it scares the crap out of you. Well, you physically have a reaction. You might have goosebumps, or you might all of a sudden kind of break out into a little bit of a sweat. For many people, the thought of public speaking can make them not only nervous but nauseous and break out into a cold sweat. So that's all examples of physical reactions in the body to emotional states of mind. And so for the majority of people, I would say stress or emotions is the biggest cause. Again, yet people don't really easily see the connection. Hopefully my example kind of helped drive the point home, but it is, the mind piece is 70%, in my opinion, 70% of the problem or the challenge, whereas people are quick to blame it on the physical part. So, my back hurts, so I've got something wrong with my back. Well, you might have something going on with the back, the muscles specifically, or the spine, the vertebrae, the disc, etc. But more often than not, the biggest driver, the biggest cause is the emotional piece.
See, that's very interesting, because I know a lot of people who talk about the back book. I can't remember the actual name of it, but my ex-boyfriend actually had horrible chronic back pain, and he read the back book and was cured overnight. So, and I've heard a couple other people who have claimed similar things, including people on the Amazon page of the book, which I can't remember the name of.
Yeah, Dr. Sarno's. Dr. Sarno. He has several books on the subject, and I highly recommend them. He's done great work. The thing that he didn't do, and this is the way most people are, most professionals and experts, they have their one thing, and they say that their one thing is everybody's cure or solution. Right. And what I've found and what I've learned over my career is, for instance, I kind of muscle imbalances was my thing I started out with. And at first I tried to say, this is the solution to every problem. And what I found was, it worked for a lot of people. 70–80% of the people, got rid of their pain. But there was these stubborn cases. And I was like, they're just not doing it right. They're not doing it. And what I found is there's a lot more to it. And so the approach that I try to teach people is very holistic, is to look at the body as a whole and look at all the components and all the underlying causes that could exist. And then when you design a treatment program for yourself, you've got to make sure you're covering all your bases. And the mind is the biggest piece. And so, I definitely recommend people learn more about the mind and how it affects us physically.
So what are some recommendations for treatment of the mind element?
Yeah, so there's so many great resources out there. I would say first and foremost, stress is a big component, and many people don't know how to deal with stress. And by stress, I mean negative stress. So the best way to deal with negative stress is to cut it out of your life. And people are afraid. People tend to be fearful of doing that. I can't not talk to my parent anymore, my mother or my father. But many people have these very negative relationships with people in their life, and they are afraid to limit or cut off that. And so I would say be courageous and do it, and you will see dramatic improvements in your life. So be aware. The first step is kind of being aware of, where is there negativity in my life that I could, cut it out. At the very least, limit it. So, and it's everything from people you interact with, friends, family, coworkers. Could be, working at a job you don't like. So that's one of the biggest things is people who are unhappy in their lives. Unhappiness with your life creates more physical problems than anything physical.
Yeah.
And so you kind of got to look at your life. You got to do this assessment and say, where are all the places that I'm not feeling happy? And again, work to improve each area.
So in terms of your area of expertise, the muscle imbalances, what are some lifestyle no-nos that people do every day unknowingly that can lead to, throwing out your back or something, blowing out a tire, as you would say?
Mm-hmm. So actually, before I answer that, I'll mention two other quick things that I should have mentioned a moment ago about how to deal with the stress and the emotions. So meditation is great. Many people, who are not familiar with meditation, for years I blew it off. I can't do that. I don't want to do that. Now that I know what it is, it's just basically relaxing your mind. Just like you can relax your body, you can relax your mind. And there's so many great resources out there, from kind of follow-along meditation programs, apps on your phone, CDs you can listen. I mean, there's so many ways to do it. But meditation, yoga is great. Tai Chi is great, journaling, therapy, there's so many ways you can address it, and there's so many great books and resources, and we can, talk more about that if needed later. But so your next question then was about lifestyle choices that people make that either can make them experience pain, and then I'm going to add to that, if it's okay, the reverse. Which is, lifestyle choices that you can make that will prevent or limit pain.
Perfect.
So, so some of the common choices, lifestyle choices people make are, we just talked about the stress piece. So that's the first one. Is the most common choices people make are not being aware of the stress and negativity in their life, and not taking steps to limit or eliminate it. Another would be how they eat. So actually, before we went live on the air, you and I were talking about, a lot of people do all sorts of crazy diets. They go from one extreme to another. And I kind of call it the pendulum. So they're on one side, they're doing the cabbage soup diet or whatever.
Oh, and then, hopefully not. That was awful.
And then 2 weeks later, they're living off of bread and wine. And then after a couple weeks of that, they're fat and they're feeling sick, and they're like, "That's it. I got to do something with my life." And then they swing back the other way to to the other extreme. And a pendulum that's balanced in the center doesn't move. And so balance is to me, balance is the key to the universe. Everything in life, balance is the key. And so many people struggle with balance. And so I would just remind people to really focus on finding balance in everything you do, in how you think, in how you move, how you eat, how much you eat, when you eat. Really just kind of strive for balance. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be striving for balance. So like the way I eat, people are always saying, well, isn't that hard to do? And I was like, no, I just relax about it. And when I want to have something that's unhealthy, I'm going to have it, and I'm not going to beat myself up in a negative way. I'm going to say, you know what, this is great. I love this. This is really enjoyable. This tastes delicious. I'm not going to eat it every day. I'm not going to, do that all the time. But then I go right back into the center. So most people are swinging wildly on this pendulum. I stay as close to the center, and if I swing off to the side a little bit, then I swing back a little bit. But I really try to limit the amount of swing of my pendulum, if you will, in my life in general. But so eating is one way. let's see, what's another lifestyle choice? Water. Many people are chronically dehydrated and they're not getting enough water, and our body needs water. And in particular, our spinal discs. Yep, in particular, our spinal discs are over 70% water, and so without enough water, you can't be optimally healthy. So muscles need water to relax. All these chemical processes in your body need water, and so a lot of people just don't drink enough water. So that's one. So nutritional, hydration. I would say another big one is physically. Most people sit, and when they sit, they relax their body because it's easy to relax and it feels good to relax, but they then relax into poor posture. So poor posture is really common from whether you're in the car.
A do and don't juxtaposition here on Google Plus, because Jesse is standing right now while doing this talk, and I am sitting and looking down at my computer.
Right, yeah, and not only am I standing, like I told you before, I'm standing on a wobble disc.
Show us your wobble disc.
So, I don't know if you can see that there.
Beautiful.
So it's balance. It's stimulating my acupressure points in my foot. So I'm standing on it on one foot, focusing on balance. So it's kind of giving me stability in my ankle. It's forcing my core to work. As you said, I'm standing. I've got this sit to stand kind of ergotron desk set up here, where I can move my monitor up and down. I can put my leg up and stretch, on the desk while we're talking. And that's pretty much what I do throughout most of the day. Since I do work at a desk, usually 6 to 8 hours a day, some days more. I do that as a way to minimize the amount of damage that I do to my body by being at a desk all day.
So what is someone, because standing desks are great, but they're very expensive. So, someone like me who doesn't even have a real desk, I have like a little console that I use as a desk, so it's really bad practices. But what are some simple things that I can do every day to minimize the risk of sitting?
Yeah, so first I would challenge the assumption that creating a sit-to-stand work environment is expensive. Yes, there are expensive desks. I bought one first a few years ago from my office, and it was like $3,000. So it was expensive for a desk, a small desk too. But now there are so many tools that are more affordable. So Ergotron is a company that I use, and almost everybody who works for me has one of these because and I paid for it for them because I want them to be standing throughout the day. The healthier they are, the better they're going to perform for me as a member of my team. But so there's tools by companies, and there's other companies out there. I don't know all the names of them, but there's affordable tools that you can get for just several $100s that can turn your operation or your office setup into a kind of sit to stand. And also, you can also just do some of it with really low budget things yourself. I've seen some of these crank desks where it's like $200 and there's a crank on it, and you just crank the side and it's mechanical, and it'll just raise your desk. So there's lots of ways you could do it. You could have 2 different workstations, in your home potentially if you have the space. Where you've got a sit station, and then you've got another, maybe you stand at the kitchen counter because it's like a breakfast bar, if you're working on a laptop maybe, so on. I also was going to say I have a video on YouTube that people can watch that kind of goes through how to kind of set up your work environment for optimal posture, so people can find that on my website if they're interested in more.
I will share that link with everyone. Okay, but to play devil's advocate, hypothetically, I'm sitting at my desk for 6 hours straight. Of course, one easy fix would be to try and get up every once in a while, and I know that's something that you preach. So if I were to get up every once in a while, are there any easy stretches I could do that could in particular target the muscles that I'm hurting while sitting?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I have another video that shows you exactly that. I can try to talk about it now, and if you can see, I'll even try to demonstrate some here.
That'd be great.
But yeah, absolutely. So first is being aware when you're sitting, what muscles are getting short and tight. and what muscles are getting weak. So,
and is there a better way to sit? I know crossing your legs isn't necessarily good. Are there other little tweaks that we can think about in the back of our mind?
Sure. So I'm going to pull my chair over here. So, all right. So going to seating here. So I don't know if you can see this, but this is a chair that we sell. Has a swinging action here.
Oh, cool.
But what it does is when you sit in a chair, it allows your body weight and your body size and your body shape to automatically, just like a pendulum, find the center point balance. Mm-hmm. And so once you do, it puts you in the perfect posture in terms of your spine. So when you think about sitting, let me move this down. When you think about sitting, what muscles are getting tight? So the muscles in the front of the hips, right here, the hip flexor muscles, mm-hmm. are shortening when you are in the seated position. They just are all bunched up, right? Mm-hmm. When you're in seated position and your knee is bent at 90 degrees, your hamstring is now short. Normally the hamstring is fully lengthened when your leg is straight out, right?
Yeah.
So when you are seated, the hamstring is tight as well. When you're seated, you are not using your gluteals. The glute muscles are not being used, other than as a cushion. And so the more time you spend sitting, the glutes don't really get used. Mm-hmm. Abdomen doesn't really get worked when you spend a lot of time sitting. So in addition to stretches, which I'll talk about in a second, one of the other things you can do is sit on a Swiss ball.
Okay.
So when you sit on a Swiss ball, what it does, well, it does several things, but one is it forces you to sit up straighter. One, there's no backrest to lean back against. Two, right. You kind of have to balance yourself on the ball. Three, you'll find that you'll want to bounce around a little bit. You'll want to move your body, and that's good and that's healthy. You'll also find yourself kind of rocking side to side, and you'll stretch your sides of your back and your hips out a little bit. You might bend forward and touch your toes and stretch your back. You might lean, and lay back on the ball. Again, you can't see all of that, but so that's one way. Is sitting on a Swiss ball is a great way to, be more physically active, engage more muscles in your body, and so it's better than sitting in a chair. But even sitting on a ball all day, while better, still you're tightening your hip flexors, still you're tightening your hamstrings, and still some of your muscles are not working. So then you want to talk about stretches. So the stretches to offset that, I'm going to bring you standing again. So for the hip flexors, the muscles in the front of the hips, you would do a lunge type stretch. And I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but I can put my leg up on my desk, and I can kind of lunge forward. This is a little high for this stretch, but you can put your foot on your chair or on a step. It's kind of the hurdler's kind of lunge stretch.
Yeah.
That's one way to stretch that muscle out. The other, easy, is you get up out of your seat and you just bend forward as if you're going to touch your toes, and you just hang there. And you're going to lengthen the hamstrings, and you're going to lengthen the back muscles.
Okay.
So that's a really simple one. Another important one, as we sit, we kind of compress down due to gravity. So you want to kind of lengthen the torso out again. So you do a little reach overhead and then reach to the side. So a side bend. First a reach for the sky and then a reach for the side, or a side bend.
Okay.
So that's another great one. And then a rotation, some type of a twisting movement to kind of twist, because when you're sitting in a chair, you're very straightforward. Mm-hmm. You're not having any rotation, and so that's a good move to add. So you can get up, stretch to the side, bend forward, touch your toes, stretch your hips out a little bit, stretch your quadriceps.
Okay, quad.
And again, I demonstrate all these on my website in many videos. So.
Okay, so how often should people be doing these stretches in a day in order to keep their muscles loose and in balance?
Yeah, my general rule of thumb is at least 2 to 3 times a day. If you're talking about a 6 to 8 hour typical work day, at least 2 or 3 times. So for me, I usually do a couple stretches in the morning before I come to my office. I usually would do several throughout the day. Typically before or after my lunch, I'll do a little extra, and then at the end of the day, I'll do some typically when I go home. So stretching, basically, it's one of those things. The more you do it, the better. And I'm not talking about like spending a lot of time. I'm not talking about 15-minute stretching sessions, which is great. If you make time to do that, that's even better. But most people won't. I don't even. So it's a matter of just kind of fitting it into your life in a way that feels like it works for you.
So these are for maintenance. What about like some issues? I know you mentioned in your book like the simplest thing of men who keep their wallet in their back pocket while sitting, and women who wear high heels all the time. Mm-hmm. Are there other like little things like that if people just limited or fixed altogether, eliminated altogether, that they would probably have less imbalance?
Yeah, sure. Certainly the high heels is a huge one.
And explain to us why that is.
Sure. Well, if you look at what happens to the foot and the leg, well, really, if you were to look at somebody's whole body, what happens when you wear a high heel? You tighten the calf. Well, first you change the kind of the structure of the foot. Instead of the foot being like this, you now are like this. And I can't show it here easily with my hand, but if you look at a picture of somebody, and there's people done this, they've got diagrams of showing what happens in the ankle, what happens to the Achilles tendon, what happens to the muscles of the calf, in the lower back of the leg, what it does to the toes. I mean, most high heels are they're screwing everything up. It's screwing up your foot and your toes. It's screwing up your ankle. It's tightening, creating extreme tightness in the calves, which is creating a muscle imbalance. So all of this is creating muscle imbalances just from the shape and design of the shoe. But what it also does, and this is the bigger problem, is it forces you up on your toes, and when you're up on your toes, your back arches more than it would normally to balance, and so you're creating extra tightness in the muscles in the lower back. They kind of get shorter and tighter as you arch your back, and of course women always want to arch their back because it puts the chest out and the rear end out, and of course men find that attractive, and so for that thousands of years it seems women have been doing that, but it's not good for your body. So, I would also encourage women to find a man who doesn't care about high heels, because to me, in fact, I'm repulsed by high heels because I know what it does to the woman's body. Anytime I see it, I'm like, oh no, that's like it's like physical torture. So that's just one example. You mentioned the wallet thing. Wallets, obviously, anybody putting anything in their back pocket.
Right.
More common is cell phones. So people are sitting on their cell phones, and it's not quite as big as a typical man's wallet, but it also is just throwing you off a little bit, throwing your pelvis off, tweaking you a little bit, twisting you to the side. So there's so many examples. How you sit at work, how you sit in a car, if you drive, or if you're on the train, how you sit on the train, how you sit, how you move, how you use your body really matters. And so, like I said earlier, the key is kind of awareness. Like, just be aware, like, when I sit down, how am I sitting? When I move my body, how am I moving my body? When I go up and down the stairs, am I alternating right, left, or am I always favoring one leg versus another? When I go up or down the stairs, is it easier on one leg versus another? So you're just kind of being aware of your body and how you use it and how it feels when you use it.
So I know you really stress symmetry, and as someone who's done yoga for many years, whenever you go into practice, they always tell you to switch which arm you're, favoring in terms, even if you're just stretching your arms this way. Mm-hmm. Maybe that was a bad example. I haven't been to yoga in a while, hence the back issues. But for me personally, I mean, I know the sitting is really terrible for my muscles, and I've certainly, as I've been evaluating things for the last week, I know that that's a big problem. But also standing and cooking all the time has not been great for me either. And I think a lot of that is because I obviously have a dominant hand for when I'm chopping and things. Mm-hmm. So I know you stress if you wear your bag on one shoulder, switch to the other shoulder. But for things like writing, for things like driving with obviously one foot on the accelerator, for things like cooking where, you know, you don't want to like try and be ambidextrous with a knife if that's uncomfortable. Like, how do you work around those things?
Yeah, so you do want to try to, you know, kind of balance yourself out with the action. So you're right, when you're driving, you know, you have to have your right foot on the gas. But many people don't realize this when they're driving. They'll always have one hand on the steering wheel. And so that's something I'm always aware of. Okay, I've had this hand on the wheel for a while. I'm going to switch it. And I also switch the position. It's not always, you know, on top. It's sometimes on the side. Sometimes it's kind of near the bottom of the steering wheel. So kind of changing, always be aware of your body. Like if you always have your left arm on the steering wheel and it's up on top like this, it's rolling all this muscle up tight close to my jaw. So it lifts the shoulder, this shoulder gets tight, this chest or pec muscle gets tight because this arm is always in front of the body. So kind of being aware again is important.
So it's like finding diversity just in your movements generally just as important as kind of like fixing your favored sides?
I would say yes, whenever it's possible. Some situations, like you said, you might not, you want to do it with a knife. You might cut your finger off. But you could do it with brushing your teeth, right? Everybody brushes with their dominant hand, but that's an example of a time when you can practice, you know, using your other side. So yeah, you want to do that. But in addition, when you know you have an imbalance, just trying to balance things out through actions isn't enough. You need to do corrective stretches and corrective exercises. And so you really just have to understand what it is that you have that you're trying to undo or reverse. So if it's tightness, like I said, in the chest here on the left side, because I always drive with my left hand, I say, okay, well, I need to reverse that. So the opposite of tight pec is a stretched pec, so stretching the chest muscle, you know, would be one example. And so, in fact, one of the things I always teach people, and they're always, you know, kind of caught off guard by this, is asymmetrical exercise. So nobody should be doing a symmetrical exercise program. And what I mean by that, because everybody says, oh, make sure you do it on your left side, you know, too. Well, that generally speaking makes sense for the reasons we talked about a moment ago. But asymmetrical exercise plans make more sense because your body is out of balance. Your workout routine shouldn't be balanced. You know, if you are really tight in the chest, maybe I don't need to do any chest strengthening exercises at all, and it needs to be all upper back focused. So imbalances require imbalanced exercise approach. So, and it's all about identifying the imbalances that you have and then doing the right combination of corrective stretches and exercises for your imbalances. And we're all different. So, you know, it's why if you've ever been to the doctor or the chiropractor or the physical therapist and they give you that generic sheet, hey, here are the 5 exercises you should do if you have back pain. It works for 60% of people because those were the ones that they needed to do. But for the other half, it didn't work. It made their pain worse because for some people, that one exercise is tightening a muscle that's already tight, you know, or weakening a muscle that's already weak.
Oh yeah, I've been there. Bad chiropractor exercises. So I know you have an assessment on your site. What are some of the stages besides just like obviously going through your daily motions, being more aware? I know you have people take pictures of their body when standing and sitting. How does that work in terms of figuring out where those imbalances are?
Yeah, when you take pictures, pictures don't lie. Especially if you're not trying to doctor the picture, like posing. So when we ask people to take pictures, we say we want you to sit down in a chair, stand up naturally, and just relax, and have somebody take a picture of you from the front, from both sides, from the back. And we want to look. You know, we want you to look at your body in the pictures and see, wow, look at this one shoulder is really down. I never realized that my right shoulder is lower than my left. You know. These things become visible in the photos, and then of course we ask you to send them in to us, and then we analyze them, and we help you confirm, ideally confirm your findings, because again, we're all about teaching you how to do this yourself. We want you to understand your body and be able to fix your body. We can't rely on some outside person to solve our own problems, because first of all, nobody cares about your problems as much as you do. And just also to kind of be clear, problem to me is not a bad thing. If you have in your mind a bad kind of connotation for the word problem, and it stirs up negativity, then say challenge or project. I've got this challenge that I'm going to overcome. To me, I've already made a mental mind shift about the word problem. It doesn't, it's not a negative thing for me, but for some people it still is, and so that, be aware of that. Be aware of how certain words give you certain reactions in your mind and how you view yourself and your current situation. Do you have a big problem that you feel like you're never going to solve, or do you feel like you have a challenge that you're going to overcome? There's a big difference.
Totally.
But so yeah, so the pictures are used to kind of visually identify where the body might be out of balance. And those visual assessments help confirm the physical assessments, which are stretches and exercises that you do to see where you're tight, where you're weak, and kind of give you an idea of where you're out of balance.
Got it. So just a couple more minutes before we wrap things up. But I'm curious because I was recently recommended to roll.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you think that works?
Oh, yeah, you mean with the foam roller?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's a wonderful way to do kind of manual tissue work on yourself. For me, I'd rather get a massage.
I mean, me too, but
so
it's a little bit cheaper to roll.
Exactly, yeah. But yeah, so rolling is great. But here's the thing. Rolling is going to help, if you had back pain and somebody said, oh, the solution is rolling, that's going to work for like 10% of people. Because for 10% of people, they had that one tight muscle and rolling loosened it up, and that was enough to give them relief. So I would say rolling is beneficial, but it's not the place to, certainly not the place to start. Mm-hmm. You want to start with the biggest causes, and then then you get down when first you identify the biggest causes and you address those with the most effective treatment for that cause. Then after that, if you still need more, then you go to additional things like that.
Okay, so mind, muscle imbalance,
mm-hmm.
treatments, and then I know you talk about inversion therapy. That's something I haven't heard about before. And recommend some tables. Are there like inversion tables that you can find at the gym and do it there? Like, how can you work that into your life without investing so much into a table?
Yeah, there's lots of ways you can do it, and it's not even about inversion. It's about spinal decompression. So you're decompressing the spine. So if you picture the, let me use this as an example. So this calculator here is going to be your spinal disc, and my fists are the vertebrae, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you can see that, right? Okay, so if that's what your spine is like, in a healthy state, what happens over time is we smash it down, and the space between them gets tighter and tighter due to gravity and muscles. So muscles, over time, our muscles in our torso, from basically the head down to the waist, all the muscles in the torso get tight. As they get tight over time, they compress the spine down. Okay? Now, if that weren't bad enough, and it is, they typically don't do it evenly. So what typically happens is there's extra tightness on one side because we're out of balance, and so instead of just pushing straight down, it's like this. I don't know if you can see what's happening here. There's more pressure on one side than the other, and it starts to open up more space on the left and tighter on the right, or vice versa. Well, when that happens, you're putting uneven pressure on the disc. So if you think of the disc as like a water balloon or a jelly donut, if you have a jelly donut between your hands and you push perfectly evenly, you're going to have some squirt out on multiple sides, right? Right? Well, if you push unevenly on one side, it's all going to squirt out the backside, right? Well, this is what happens to our discs. They rupture or rip open, and some of the discs, because it's a kind of a jelly fluid-like material, mostly water, pushes out, and if it touches the nerve, then you have nerve-based pain. Okay? Now, key distinction, there's two types of pain. There's nerve-based pain, and then there's tissue or muscle-based pain. This is where people really often have trouble, is it's very common to have both. And you'll do something you'll do a treatment and it works for one. So maybe you do something, it takes away some of the muscle, tissue-based pain, but you're like, God, I still have this tingling down my leg. Well, that's the nerve-based pain, and so it's very common to have both of those. So back to the spinal decompression for a second. So you've got the pressure downward, you've got the uneven pressure downward, and then you have a rotation. Many people, based on the work they do, have a little bit of a rotation like this. So, dentists, this is very common for dentists because they're always bent over somebody's mouth, this way, right? They're always bending the same way. And so what it does is it creates a rotation in their spine. So lots of pressure down, uneven, and rotating. And that's what happens in our spines. And the worse that is, the more likely it is to cause a disc problem. The one thing I'll say about discs is they heal. Just like you can cut your arm open and it'll scab back up and heal, your discs can heal. They just heal very slow because there's not a lot of blood flow there to them. They're mostly water, and it can't heal if you don't lighten the load with the compression, and if you don't get it back to balance instead of uneven, and if you don't take some of that twisting out of the spine. So you gotta, and that's why most people, when they go to a chiropractor and they do various, treatments or therapies, they have limited results. It's because they've only addressed part of the issue. You have to take this very holistic view and then kind of address all the causes.
So where can people find, can you find a inversion table at the gym? Is it just one of those things where you put your feet in and lie back?
You can. Some gyms have them. Some gyms have gravity boots, they call them, which are little boots that are hooked up to the pull-up bar, and you strap yourself into these boots and you hang upside down. You can do that. There's other devices in addition to inversion tables. We have a device that we call the back ease, which is simpler to do than inversion therapy. You basically lean into the machine. There's a waist belt, and you just kind of lean down and forward, and it pushes back. Kind of holds your hips down, and then gravity pulls your head and your upper body away from your hips. Another form is spinal traction. So chiropractors will put you into a little table, and they'll put a strap on your waist or your ankles, and then they'll put a strap on the upper body, and they're basically kind of stretching your upper body away from your lower body.
Got it. All right, well, this has been super helpful. So do you have anything else that you want to add before we say goodbye?
Yeah, I would say we kind of jumped around and covered a lot, but we didn't cover all the causes. And so there are other causes, what I would consider major causes, that you need to know about and that you need to address if you want to get relief. And again, as I teach in my book, it doesn't make sense to do certain things until you've exhausted, the primary. So if you haven't addressed all the primary causes with the appropriate treatments, then you shouldn't go and do X, Y, or Z. So for instance, you would never go, or you should never go and have a surgery unless you've exhausted all these other things first. So there's certain treatments that make sense at a certain time and in a certain order. And so that's one of the things I teach in the book is how to know what to do when, based on your situation and what you've done so far. Cool.
Well, thank you so much, Jesse. I'm going to be finding my own treatment plan and protocol shortly. And for everyone who's watching or watching at a later time, I'll post some of the links to Jesse's work and some of his tools that are on his website on the event page and also on my site, Feed Me Phoebe. All right, take care. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.